Christmas 2023, one luxury holiday cake, Pandoro, turns into a reputational earthquake. Chiara Ferragni, Italy's biggest fashion influencer, becomes the headline for the wrong reason. Italy's competition authority, AGCM, said a Ferragni-branded charity-linked campaign misled consumers about how donations worked, fining companies linked to her one tolo. 75 million and fining cake maker Bolocco for $20,000. The internet calls it Pandorogate, and the fallout is immediate, because this isn't just about a product, it's about trust. Days later, Ferragni apologized, called it a communication error, and said she would donate a large sum to the Children's Hospital as the controversy exploded. Then comes the twist that rewrites everything. On January 14, 2026, a Milan judge acquitted Ferragni of aggravated fraud charges tied to the Pandoro and Easter egg promotions, despite prosecutors seeking 1 year and 8 months, ending a 2-year legal cloud. And almost immediately, the comeback visuals arrive. Guess announced Ferragni as the face of its Spring-Summer 2026 global campaign. So here's the case file. Fined by regulators, pulled into court, cleared by a judge, and still judged by the public. What really happened, and why did this scandal change the rules of influencer trust? Before Pandorogate became a headline, Chiara Ferragni wasn't just a celebrity, she was a blueprint. In 2009, Ferragni launched The Blonde Salad as a personal fashion blog. Daily looks, travel, street style, the kind of content that existed before influencer became a job title. At the time, fashion blogging was still niche, and the power shift hadn't fully happened yet. Creators weren't just documenting trends, they were starting to create them. But what made Ferragni different was scale and structure. The Blonde Salad quickly evolved beyond a blog into a business, content, brand partnerships, and a talent marketing operation that treated attention like an asset that could be built, measured, and sold. Harvard Business School even turned the Blonde Salad into a formal case study, because by then, Ferragni wasn't only posting outfits. She was a strategy problem. How do you turn a personal brand into a durable company without losing authenticity? By the late 2010s, Ferragni's rise had become a story in itself. A documentary, Chiara Ferragni, Unposted, framed her career as a modern fame engine, how a single person can become a media channel, a product line, and a global narrative at the same time. And that's the key. Ferragni's brand wasn't built on one viral moment. It was built on trust, the quiet agreement between creator and audience. I show you my life, you believe me. In that economy, credibility is currency. It's why fashion partnerships work, it's why recommendations sell, and it's why anything touching charity and money becomes explosive. Because the story stops being about style and starts being about integrity. So when a holiday product campaign was framed as doing good, the audience didn't just see a cake, they saw a promise. To understand why this blew up so fast, you have to see how the campaign felt to the public versus how it was later described in official findings. The product at the center of the storm was a limited edition Ferragni-branded Pandoro, a traditional Italian Christmas cake, released with Bolocco and packaged in a way that connected the purchase to a children's hospital. Multiple reports described the message as suggesting that buying the cake would help support the Regina Margherita Children's Hospital in Turin, the kind of promise that instantly turns a normal purchase into a good deed. And that's the key detail. The campaign wasn't just selling dessert, it was selling meaning. In the influencer economy, meaning is leverage, because when a purchase is framed as charitable, the buyer isn't just choosing a product. They're choosing a side. They're buying into a story where spending money looks like kindness. But then the paper trail enters the room. According to Reuters, Italy's competition authority AGCM said companies controlled by Ferragni were fined €175 million for misleading customers over charity donations linked to the cake sales, and Bolocco was fined $420,000. The regulator's logic, as reported by Reuters, was blunt. Consumers were led to believe the campaign connected purchases to donations. Yet the donation structure didn't match that impression. Here's the detail that turned confusion into outrage. Reuters reported that, per the regulator, Bolocco had made a one-off $50,000 donation to the hospital months before the product launched, meaning the donation was not tied to the number of Pandoro sold. In other words, if customers believed each purchase helps, the regulator said the reality didn't work that way. The donation had already happened, and sales didn't increase it. Then comes the second lightning rod, money flowing in the opposite direction. Reuters also reported that the regulator said Ferragni's companies received $1 million from Bolocco for the branding initiative and related promotional activity, while Ferragni made no personal payments to the hospital at that time. That detail didn't just anger people, it created a moral whiplash. A charity-framed campaign where the charity amount was fixed, while the branding fee was large and clear. And that's why the scandal name stuck. Pandorogate wasn't just gossip, it was a collision between perception and accounting. Because in a traditional ad, a consumer expects persuasion. But when the word charity enters the message, the rules change. Charity isn't just a marketing angle, it's a trust contract. It taps into identity. I'm the kind of person who helps. Dois. So when the public sees a gap between what the message implied and what the regulator later described, the reaction isn't mild disappointment, it's betrayal. Ferragni's response tried to reframe the story as a mistake, not a scheme. Reuters reported she apologized and called it a communication error, saying she would donate $1 million to the hospital. But by then, the scandal had already grown legs, because the conversation wasn't only about her intent. It was about a bigger fear that viewers have learned the hard way. If you can package a purchase as compassion, where does marketing end and manipulation begin? This is the moment the case stops being about one influencer and becomes a mirror for the entire industry. Audiences don't hate advertising, they hate feeling used, and regulators don't punish fame, they punish the point where promotional framing becomes, in their view, misleading. The fine wasn't the end of the story, it was the beginning of the price tag, because Pandorogate hit Ferragni where her empire actually lived, credibility. In the days after AGCM's decision, the scandal stopped being a niche Italian debate and turned into a global case study about influencer marketing and charity messaging. Reuters reported the controversy led to cancelled brand deals and a broader political and regulatory reaction in Italy. Ferragni moved quickly in public, part apology, part damage control. Reuters reported she called it a communication error and said she would donate $1 million to the Regina Margherita Children's Hospital. But online, the narrative had already split into two lanes. One side believed she'd made a messy mistake in how the charity connection was presented. The other believed the gap between charity vibe and money flow was too big to be accidental. And in scandals like this, that second lane is sticky because it's powered by a single question viewers can't stop replaying. If I bought this to help kids, what exactly did my money do? Then the story widened beyond Ferragni herself. The Italian government and regulators treated it like a warning flare. Reuters reported that Italy's cabinet moved toward a bill demanding greater clarity when product sales are linked to charity donations, explicitly in the wake of the Ferragni controversy. And Reuters also reported that AGCM, the communications authority, approved stricter rules aimed at transparency for influencers with large audiences. That shift matters because it raises the stakes. This wasn't just a celebrity scandal. It was a scandal with consequences, new rules, new expectations, a new kind of public skepticism. But the biggest escalation wasn't social, it was legal. Here's the crucial distinction your audience needs to understand, because it's where the case becomes a thriller. AGCM's fine is an administrative finding about misleading commercial practices. A criminal fraud charge is a different threshold entirely, one that puts intent, deception, and alleged harm under a courtroom microscope. And that courtroom microscope did arrive. On January 29, 2025, Reuters reported that Milan prosecutors sent Ferragni to trial on fraud charges over allegedly misleading charity claims linked to both the Pandoro and Easter egg campaigns, according to her lawyers and judicial sources. Now the case had a second life. Not just did the campaign mislead, but did it cross the line into a crime? Because a trial doesn't care about vibes. It cares about structure, what was said, what was implied, what was paid, what was understood, and who benefited. By the time Ferragni walked toward court, Pandorogate had already done its first damage: public trust. The trial threatened a second kind of damage, a formal judgment that could freeze her comeback for years. And that sets up the moment everyone was waiting for. Would the court treat it as a mistake or as fraud? For 2 years, the story moved like it had only one destination: accountability. A regulator had already fined the campaign. The headlines were relentless, and prosecutors had formally pushed the case into criminal court. So when the verdict arrived, it didn't just end a case, it snapped the narrative in half. On January 14, 2026, a judge in Milan acquitted Chiara Ferragni of aggravated fraud charges tied to the Pandoro Christmas cake promotion and the Easter egg campaigns. Reuters reported prosecutors had sought a sentence of 1 year and 8 months, but the judge cleared her after a closed-door fast-track procedure. That fast-track detail matters. It's one reason the ruling felt sudden to the public. People expected a long courtroom drama, witnesses, months of hearings, a slow drip of new information. Instead, the case ended with a clean legal line: not guilty on the criminal accusation. And here's why this shocked so many viewers who only followed the scandal through social media. A regulatory fine can say, "This marketing was misleading." A fraud conviction must cross a higher threshold, one that ties messaging to criminal intent and unlawful gain in a way a judge is willing to stamp as a crime. The court's acquittal didn't rewrite the controversy, but it did rewrite the legal conclusion. Ferragni publicly framed the ruling as relief after a long ordeal. Reuters quoted her saying justice had prevailed, describing the past 2 years as deeply difficult. But the acquittal also created a second twist. It separated the story into 2 trials happening at once. Trial No. 1, legal. The judge clears her of fraud. Trial No. 2, public. Audiences still argue about what they thought they were buying, what the campaign implied, and what charity messaging should look like in the influencer era. AP noted that, regardless of the acquittal, Ferragni had already faced administrative penalties and made large donations amid the backlash, details that keep the trust debate alive even after a legal win. And one more thread stays unresolved in the background. Prosecutors hadn't confirmed at the time whether they would appeal, so the case file closes in court, but it stays open in culture. A court acquittal can clear a legal charge, but it doesn't automatically rebuild a public narrative. That's the tightrope Chiara Ferragni walks after January 14, 2026, when a Milan judge cleared her of aggravated fraud in the Pandorogate case. Reuters. And then, almost on cue, the comeback visuals arrived. On January 21, 2026, Guess officially announced Ferragni as the face of its Spring-Summer 2026 global campaign, shot by the Morelli brothers, a glossy high-fashion statement that signals, "She's back in the room." PR Newswire. But here's the deeper ending your audience will remember. This scandal didn't just happen to Ferragni, it helped reshape the influencer world around her. In January 2024, Reuters reported Italy's communications regulator AGCM approved stricter rules aimed at transparency for celebrities and influencers with large audiences. Reuters. And later that month, Reuters reported the Italian government moved to tighten requirements for marketing tied to charity donations, pushing sellers to clearly state the purpose, recipient, and what share of a price goes to charity, with potential fines for violations. Reuters. So the Pandoro story ends in two different places at the same time. In court, Ferragni is acquitted. Reuters. In culture, the bigger message remains. Charity language is no longer soft. It's regulated, audited, and remembered. Reuters. And that's the final twist, because influencer power was built on attention, but influencer survival is built on trust. Ferragni may have won the legal fight, yet the real test is whether the audience believes the next campaign is a comeback or a reset. If you want more clean case file timelines like this, hit like. Subscribe to Behind the Flash for weekly celebrity deep dives. Comment one name you want us to open next, and tell me, is a court acquittal enough to close a scandal?